family to share more about the stories and the road that led them into the American Quarter Horse Hall of Fame. The audience will have the opportunity to ask questions and dive into the American Quarter Horse Hall of Fame inductees' history in real time. Please welcome Blue Valentine, Chip Merritt, son of Hyde Merritt, who owned Blue Valentine. Thank you. Representing Frenchman's Guy, Bill Myers, who with his wife Deb Myers raised and trained Frenchman's Guy. Thank you, Bill. Representing Shining Spark, Carol Rose, breeder and owner of Shining Spark. Thank you, Carol. Paul Jones. J.D. Yates. And past President Jim Hurd. Now let's give all of our inductees and their representatives a round of applause. So let me introduce a few other acknowledgments for some of the sponsors, and please hold your applause until I'm finished with this list. The Amarillo Convention and Visitors Bureau, our signature underwriters. The Amarillo National Bank, our dedication party underwriter. And Ruidoso Downs, who is supporting all of the events today here at the museum. Thank you, Johnny and Jana, Rick and Kim. Last and certainly not least, let's also thank the Coors Cowboy Club for providing an amazing lunch today, and Reed Beverage for supplying the beverages for this weekend. Thank you, Vance, and the Coors Cowboy Club. This event was designed so you can hear and we can record the rest of the story, or at least more of the stories of the horses and the people who will take their place among the legends honored in these hallowed halls. Our goal today is to bring the American Quarter Horse family together in an intimate and less formal setting to experience history in a real time. You will notice that there is reserved seating in the front of the room. These seats are reserved for those who want to pose questions to the inductees. If you are unable or uncomfortable with coming to the front, there are cards to write out questions that you can drop in the basket, and the moderators will ask the inductees your questions. Also, if you can't get up here and you want to ask a question on the mic, I'll bring the mic to you. We do ask, though, and this is very important, that you keep your commentary to a maximum of 2 minutes so that we can have plenty of time to share from each inductee. Now, it's important because we have 6 people who represent horses and themselves up here to have an equal opportunity as far as time's concerned. So I want to caution everyone that every single inductee and the horses they represent should have an opportunity to tell their stories. Okay, so work with me on that. For this afternoon, we do have 2 moderators on stage to help guide the conversation. And please welcome those moderators. First, AQHA Chief Racing Officer Janet Van Beaver. And second, famous Western sports and lifestyle personality and past president of the Cowboy Channel, Jeff Metters. Okay, moderators, the stage is yours.
Well, Mr. Merritt, we'll start with you. when you look at a horse, when you raise horses, and everybody here raises horses and believes in them and dreams about them, but to raise one that leaves a lasting impact on the industry, the way Blue Valentine did. Your thoughts on that and what that horse has meant to your family and your family's legacy?
Well, that's a hard question. When this whole process started, my daughter-in-law, Madison, she says, we need to get Blue Valentine in the AQHA Hall of Fame. And I said, man, there's too much money out there, too many nice horses. I just don't think they're going to want a horse like Blue Valentine. She says, we're just going to try. And I said, okay. So we kind of let her go for a while. Finally, Kathy and I, my wife and I, kind of got on the bandwagon and helped her. And we submitted it. And then it was a COVID year, so we didn't hear anything back. And then all of a sudden we got notified. And we were just amazed and so thankful that there were lots of other people out there that loved Blue Valentine as much as us. Blue didn't have many offspring. It was before, he was alive before there was AI, and he pasture bred him, and half the time my dad was yanking him out of the mares and roping on him. And so he didn't have lots of colts every year, but he was such an amazing horse, and I've talked to my cousins, the Haverty boys. Del Haverty's the one that started him and broke him, and I think there's 8 people left alive that have ever ridden Blue. And so it was fun talking to them, because they knew, Haverty's knew more about Blue in the younger years than we had him in the older, when he was later. I don't know if I answered your question, but he meant a lot to our family. And he meant a lot to my cousins and stuff too, so. But thank you for asking.
Mr. Myers, you're next on the to-do list there. Kind of a similar question for you. I think the best way to start a stampede in a group of barrel racers is to say, Frenchman's guy. And for doing the rodeo and the NFR, obviously it's a topic of conversation on the air, behind the scenes, in the barn, just a horse that made an amazing impression on the barrel racing and the speed world. And you raised him from the beginning. You had a front row seat. Your thoughts on the horse and what he meant to you guys?
Well, it's hard to describe how much he meant to us, because he's kind of like part of our family. So he was the blessing, I guess, is what I'd call him to start out with, because I don't know why God wanted us to have him, but he wanted us to, so we're awful thankful he picked us to have him. But he did so much more than we ever dreamed that he would for us and our family and other people that had a lot to do with him. So he was amazing. He did, like I said, way more than we would have ever imagined, and so we're very thankful.
Carol, it's my turn. What a legacy that Shining Spark has had, and I think most of us can talk about what he did during his life and his show career and as a stud. But I would like for you to talk about his very beginnings. Tell us how the breeding of Shining Spark came to be after the death of Zam Parbar.
That's a question. Am I live?
Yeah.
That's a question that I've talked about, or answer I've talked about so much, but Zam Parbar died. We always bred Diamond Sparkle to Zam Parbar, and he passed away in October of 1987. And here we come, 88 breeding year. What are we going to breed Diamond Sparkle? And I own Genuine Doc. I raised him, and he was a good sire. He'd raised some nice horses, but he wasn't probably a great one. And so Bobby Lewis, my business partner for 25 years, and Dr. David Hartman, my veterinarian, and we mulled it over, and we had no idea, so we said, why don't we just breed our Genuine Doc? We have him. It can't hurt. So this Palomino colt was born in the spring of 1989, and he was beautiful. But he was one of 40 colts, and I guess he was special. I don't remember, but he was one of 40 colts. We had a young stud named Zan's Diamond Son, and he was fabulous. He was out of Diamond Sparkle and by Zam Parbar, and he got injured in July of 1989, and he died unexpectedly in August. And we were, and I had a dinner party going on at my house, and the veterinary called and said that Zan's diamond son had died, and I ran out of the house with my phone, and I was hysterical, and I ran all the way to my breeding barn, and I've called my mother. I was standing outside, and I was looking north, and right in front of me was Diamond Sparkle and Shiny Sparkle on her side, and he had a halter on, so we were halter breaking and about to wean him. And my mother is so positive, and she said, "Carol, why are you so upset? Just raise another one." And I said, "Mother, you don't understand. You just don't raise another one." And, you know, we had this quite a long conversation. Finally, she said, "You can do it. Just raise another one." And I was standing there looking at Shining Spark. And, you know, this just, God meant it to be that way. And I'm so proud to have been with him when he was conceived, when he was born. And I'll tell the rest later. But you know, I'm very, very lucky, and I'm so honored that he's in this Hall of Fame, because he's everything I ever wanted in a horse. Thank you.
Treasured memory, Carol, thank you. Paul, you and I hail from the same small town in Southern California, and so I know a little about you. And we know that your dad introduced you to the sport of horse racing. But tell us about how you got your start on your own and how you survived what I'm going to call those developmental years as you were getting your own business going.
Well, it was really tough in the beginning. My first year as a trainer, I started out with 5 horses. 4 of them belonged to my mom and dad, which I didn't get paid to train. I had 1 client with 1 horse, and but I loved it, and I loved the competition. I loved the horses. It was definitely difficult for a young man in those days to get started. We had a lot of great older trainers at Los Alamitos at the time, and a young person just never, you know, you really got overlooked because there was just so much talented trainers, and I really had to do well. And that first year, I think I won with every one of my horses. Although they were cheap claimers, they weren't great horses. And from there, it just kind of built up, and next year I had 8, and next year I had 10 or 12, and then just kind of went from there. But it was definitely very difficult. You know, I had to do everything pretty much myself from the beginning, and it taught me a lot. And it made me humble throughout my career because I knew where I started from, and I never forgot that.
I think the term would be perseverance, and I applaud you for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, next is J.D. Yates. Do you guys know who J.D. is? He's kind of a wallflower, so I feel like I should almost go over his entire resume. In the 90s, during the AQHA convention, we used to, there were several of us, we would MC the award banquet that they had there. And I can remember one of my best memories of that was one of the many awards J.D. had won, but he had a full-length mink coat on when he came up to accept his awards. But he's so much personality, so much flair, whether it's the performance world or the rodeo world. Tell the story. You made the NFR at 15. That's a record, youngest ever. So you would think, you know, hey, you arrive in Oklahoma City and you're an NFR qualifier. They roll the red carpet out for you. You couldn't even get in the door, could you?
No, they thought I took my dad's number, and so the team roping started, and you got to ride down this alley to get in, and the guard wouldn't let me in, and yeah, they had to hold the team roping up for me to get through the gate to go rope.
That was just my entree into you, but you've been honored a bunch lately. Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame, AQHA, and I'm not saying that you're finally getting the due that you deserve, because I think everybody on the planet respects you and what you've accomplished. But it's so nice to see you in this situation. Your thoughts on joining two of the biggest halls in the entire Western world in a very short amount of time.
Well, it's you know, it's something you get up in the morning and you don't think about, but you could roll on, and it's been. It's been a long, dusty road, but it's been a great one. Thank you.
Dr. Hurd. I had the pleasure to come into this role at AQHA while you were on the executive committee. And I marveled at your concern not only for all membership, but for the international community and recognizing their importance to our association. So tell us what your favorite memory of yours is about working with the international affiliates during your presidency.
There are so many memories. I went to Uruguay to judge their first show in 1987, and I've been back almost every year since. But I think the thing that always amazes me about our international members is how much they love the American Quarter Horse. Sometimes here in this country, we think that the title American Quarter Horse means that they're citizens of the United States. Well, you know what? It's the breed name. And they love the American Quarter Horse for the versatility and for the people like you all that are here and everything that they love. But I think the passion that they have for our horse in these other countries. I did most of my international work in Central and South America, a little bit in Europe, but I just think the passion that they have for our horse and to take that breed, our breed, and put it in place with their native breeds.
I applaud you not only for sharing, excuse me, for imparting your knowledge, but also for increasing enthusiasm for our breed all across this globe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think now if you have some questions, you can make your way down, that you can ask questions to our inductees. And keep in mind, don't be bashful.
I got the mic.
I'll be happy to ask one while we wait on somebody to make their way to the front, and mine is for Carol. Carol, briefly tell us about Shine's accident and how that impacted his breeding career.
I couldn't understand you.
Tell us about his accident and how that impacted his breeding career.
Oh, okay. Well, Shiner didn't have an accident. He got very sick in the spring in the fall of, or spring of 1999. And he got an infection in his windpipe. It's chondritis. And he got very, very sick, and he was breathing very loudly and like hardly breathing. And it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I called Dr. Hartman, and I said, "Where are you?" And he lived in Marietta, Oklahoma, and his office was or his clinic was in Whitesboro, Texas. And he said, "I'm going right by your house." I said, "Come here quickly, something wrong with Shining Spark." And we rushed him to the vet, and they started him on a medication, and he got better, so everything was fine, but we were very lucky to save him. And in the fall, he had a reoccurrence, and we started him back on the same medication, and now we're in the 2000 breeding season, and no one ever told me to take him off the medication. So it's April, and he's still on, and we've got a few pregnant mares, but not like we need, and all of a sudden we had no pregnant mares. And Dr. Hartman said, "Carol, I need to call in a specialist. We're in trouble. We're liable, as we've taken people's money. We have no pregnant mares." And he called in Dr. Dixon Varner. And because of Dr. Varner's expertise in stay and reproduction, I won't go into all the details, but Dr. Hartman and Dr. Varner saved Shining Spark, or we would not be here today. And this ICSI breeding was on the horizon at Texas A&M, and Dr. Varner knew that, and he started freezing semen for Shining Spark for ICSI. And we did that for 8 years, and by 2012, only 2 foals were born. Prior to that, we had big foal crops. And then for 8 years, we only had 7 foals while ICSI was developing. And so now, of course, because of ICSI, Shining Spark is still a huge part of my life, and I'm so thrilled, but it's all because of Dr. Varner and Dr. Hartman. And Dr. Varner, would you please stand up? Is David Hartman here? Is David Hartman here in the hall? There he is. He's there in the back. I mean, Dr. Hartman was Shining Spark's vet for almost his whole entire life. And these two men, the whole public owes it to these two men. Thank you very much.
Blue Valentine question. What has been a favorite trait of yours that you see being passed down by Blue Valentine?
When my dad was roping on him, when my father was roping on him, he's just like another gelding. My first thing I remember about Blue was he was tied up back of the chutes at Frontier Days, just tied with all the geldings. And I've talked to my cousins and remembered stuff that I knew, but Blue could really run. I mean, his sire was Red Man, and they match raced Red Man all over the Southwest. And in fact, my uncle match raced Blue, I think 4 or 5 times. But he could really run, and he ran flat out of the box. And he was so easy to ride out of the box, but he would run hard. And you'd go trip a steer, and he would take, in those days they're big cattle. He'd take a jerk and just put his head down and go left. He was just tough-minded, but he could really run, and he was so calm. And I mean, there's a million stories about it. One year I was in junior high, and my dad and mom left. We had 500 yearlings to feed, and I was feeding with a pickup and feeding by myself, and got a 2-foot snow, got the pickup stuck, got the tractor stuck. So I just jumped on Blue. And rode 5 miles up the creek, and we had a little sled out there, and I could throw 10, 15 bales on that sled and hook on and Blue drag that sled through the snow, and he was just a great horse, and all his offspring are the same way. I mean, you talk to people we sold horses to, and people that have bought horses from other people that have Blue Valentine in their pedigree, and there's no bronkiness in him. You can just about climb on them from day one, anyway, they're just common, nice horses, but they could always run and have athletic ability.
Listen, we need to get some more audience participation, by the way, so don't be bashful. If you need the mic, I'll give it to you. Otherwise, write down some of your questions and hand them in, put them in the basket.
We have a question from the audience for Paul. Paul, tell us about your first futurity winner that you bought with your father.
That one's going to probably make me get choked up.
That's all right. That's what it's about.
So, me and my father, we bought a horse at the Pacifico sale, Los Alamitos. We paid $10,000 for him, and his name was Hit or Run. He was about 6 a run out of a Dash for Cash mare. And my first fraternity win was at the Sacramento Fairs fraternity. It ran the same day as the All-American. It was a small fraternity. It was probably worth about $60,000. And while I was there, I was, kind of dreaming about, wow, what it would be like to be at the All-American. It ran on Labor Day too. Anyhow, Hit or Run won the fraternity, and then he went on to win the Breeders' Derby at Los Alamitos, which was quite a bit bigger race. But he turned out to be one of my first special horses. And what made it so special is it was me and my dad together. And my dad has since passed away. He didn't get the opportunity to see all of my success. But that horse meant a lot, and I wouldn't be here I wouldn't be a horse trainer if it wasn't for my dad, what he taught me. So it was a special horse.
I think it would be worth mentioning you were dreaming on that given Labor Day about what it would be like to be in Ruidoso Downs. So how many times, tell the audience, did you win the All-American?
I've won the All-American fraternity 3 times. I've run second in it a few times, third in it a few times, quite a bit of qualifiers. Also, I've ended up winning the All-American Derby a few times, and the Rainbow, and the Ruidoso, and the Gold Cup. So my horse, No Secrets Here, still holds the fastest time ever for the All-American fraternity. My horse Strawkins holds the track record for 440 yards, winning the Rainbow Derby. So we had a lot of success there.
So it's safe to say your dreams that made that day at the Sacramento Fair were fulfilled.
Definitely.
You know, JD, you started out in the pro rodeo arena. You kind of migrated over to the AQHA arena. 2 very different styles of roping for the most part. You're training, cowboys that are coming up. Some of them go on the performance horse side. Some of them go on the rodeo side. What's the difference there? How do you get either side, either direction they're going? How do you get them ready for success and get those guys head in the right direction?
Well, I don't necessarily think that you train much different. You train faster, when you're going to the rodeos. But bottom line to the whole situation in rodeo and horse show and horses, you're only going to be as good as the thing between your legs. That horse is good between the legs. You trained him right. You can go rodeo on him. You can go to the horse show on him. The big story that went across the rodeo world for years. And it's still somewhat big story that them horses that you show won't make rodeo horses. I can name 15 horses, 5 or 6 of mine that we've rode at the NFR, that we've showed and won world champions on. And, C.R. Bradley had one of the greatest calf horses. They rode him there. And so, this myth of that not being a cross situation is all wrong. There's been, Sam Rose might have trained one of the greatest head horses of all times, and Skip Steelbar. He was at the national finals, Me and my dad both rode our horses in 81 and 82 that we rode at the national finals that we won the world show on. So it's a myth about that. So training these young guys, I try to get them to learn to train the horse, because I would say today in the roping world, if people could ride as good as they rope, roping would even be tougher. The riding of these people and not learning how to do a lot of different things on these horses has cost a lot of ropers a lot of chances.
This question is for Dr. Hurd. Of all of the horses that you had in making successful during your career, which is the one that stands out to you the most?
Well, that's tough. I had a mare when I was in college that belonged to some people in Chattanooga named Bob C. Holly. And I put points on her in 6 events as a 2-year-old. Now, this day and time, people think you're crazy when you say that. But she was such an athlete, such a good-looking horse. But she's still very, very special. I hauled a lot then. I'd leave class on Thursday. I know they had classes on Friday. but I didn't always get there on Friday. And sometimes didn't make it back on Monday. But, I could haul her. And she'd get to the show, she'd lay down, she'd stay there till you came and got her the next morning. But just an unbelievable personality, so athletic and so willing, and just became a really great brood mare later on. But she's still probably the one that I am closest to in my mind.
Very good.
Mr. Myers, tell us a story about potential buyer after Frenchman's Guy lost an eye.
That was when he was a yearling, and he'd lost his eye, so he was pretty disappointed, and of course, thinking we'll just try to get our money back out of him if we can, hopefully. So I had a guy call me from South Dakota there that was interested in him because he'd owned the sire of a half-brother that we had of that horse. And he come and looked at him that spring, and he was a yearling, and we just kicked him out in a little pasture we had there after that happened, and he didn't look really great. You know, he wasn't terrible, but he was growing, and you know how a lot of yearlings look when they're growing. So he come looked at him and didn't buy him. I priced him to him and didn't buy him. And years later, after he become a good sire and was a little bit, you know, pretty well known, his brother-in-law told me that he said, "Can you believe the Myerses priced that horse for $2,500? That skinny-looking little old one-eyed yearling to us. I can't believe that they would have that kind of guts." And so I've laughed about it ever since. And again, it was supposed to be, I guess, that we were supposed to keep him.
Carol, this question will be for you about Shining Spark. You have a close relationship with the famous artist Orrin Mixer. Tell us about his involvement.
Thank you. You know, we walk in this hall and we are surrounded by Orrin Mixer artwork, as you see. And Orrin Mixer was a very close friend of mine. He was the brother that I always wanted. But Orrin loved Shining Spark, and he was around when he was born. He took his first pictures. I mean, he just loved him. And when Shining was 2 years old, Dr. Hartman and I decided we needed to do a test. We wanted to test breed him and see what kind of semen we had. So in June of 1991, when Shiner was 2, Orrin was around all the time, and he had a pet mare named Miss Donna Seeker by Gold Seeker Bars. And she was 20 years old, and he'd always bred her to Appaloosas. And I said, "Orrin, would you like to breed your mare to Shiner? We need to do test breeding." Oh, sure, he was thrilled, so he did. And we bred 2 mares and had 2 foals the following May, one of which was a sorrel filly that Orrin named She's a Shiny Mixer. And she was gorgeous, and I had a young trainer training reining horses, and he was going to his first fraternity when this filly was 3, and she was his entry. And when the dust cleared, she made the finals of the National Reining Horse Association fraternity, and she was 15th place. And I mean, this is a test breed, mind you, out of a daughter of Gold Seeker Bars who had never been bred to anything but Appaloosas. but Orrin was, I mean, he was just so dear to me. And so when we started advertising Shining Spark, he wanted to do the ads, and he would show up, if the ad was due tomorrow, he'd show up tonight at 8 o'clock at my house, and the dining room table spread out papers, and he'd have pencils, and he'd do everything by hand. And then he would leave my house and drive those ads to Amarillo from Gainesville, Texas, so he could show the Journal how he wanted the ad laid out. And he was so wonderful, and we did this for several years. And then I'm a real study of the Quarter Horse Journal. I started reading the Quarter Horse Journal. I mean, I always read it, but I'd read it from cover to cover, and I loved Bob Avila's ads. I just loved them, and now Shining Spark started having babies, and I wanted to advertise the babies, and Orrin thought we just keep using pictures of Shiner, so I kind of hurt his feelings, and I said, "Orrin, I'm sorry, but I want to do my ads differently." And I did a lot of research, and I found who did Bob Avila's ads. And 30 years later, Cam Essick, will you please stand up? Cam's done my advertising, social media. It's 30 years this year that she's advertised Shining Spark, and she's done a marvelous job. And one more person I'd like to recognize here today, Robert Mixer, Orrin Mixer's son. Robert, where are you? Robert's way in the back. Yep. Orrin, you know, he was just my dearest friend, but he always wore a red shirt. And here came Robert today with a red shirt, and I said, oh, I was almost in tears. And you have your red shirt on? He said, yeah, I did it for two people, my dad and you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the question.
You know, you see the art in here, and I didn't have that much of a relationship with Orrin Mixer, but every encounter that I had with him was a story, you know, from pain. I went up and did a story with him, and he had seen on television where the president of Mexico had given Ronald Reagan, at the time he was a president, Mr. and Mrs. Reagan, a horse. So he recorded it on his VCR, and he painted the horse heads of each of them. And then he waited for President Reagan to take a break and take a vacation and go to his ranch in California. And when he did, he threw those paintings in the station wagon and drove all the way to his ranch in California. And of course, the Secret Service meets him and stops him, and they're like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I got paintings for the president. And they're like, yeah, no, you don't. And they went back and forth, and Orrin said, okay, I'll go home. I'll turn around and drive back to Oklahoma, but just do me a favor. Just go in and tell President Reagan that Orrin Mixer is here and he has a painting for him. And the head of Secret Service said, you are wasting my time, but I'm going to do it. And he came back shaking his head and said, the president said, let him in. He said they looked under his car with the mirrors and he got to see the president. But if he was still alive, I'd do a reality show around him because he was really, really something. JD, talk about your mentors. Oh, Carol, do you have something?
I wanted to add to that event, just for a second, of Orrin. Bobby Lewis and I were driving home from Tulsa, Oklahoma, from a circuit one night at about midnight. We were going down the turnpike, which Orrin lived right off the turnpike, and Bobby said, let's go see Mixer. We know he painted all night. And we walked in his studio at midnight, and right after the 1st of January, and he was working on those paintings he did one of Ronald Reagan and one of his wife, Nancy. He did 2 of them. So sorry, I just had to finish that.
JD, talk about mentors. Who's some of the guys that really shaped you as a youngster and put you on the rodeo road?
Well, you know, I don't know that I had any true mentor when I was growing up but my dad. But, you know, through that, you know, I got a lot, learned a lot from him, learned a lot about gathering cattle in the mountains, riding up and down hills, doing that. I mean, I made big bucks. I made $5 a day working when I was 5 years old. And he was a brand inspector. He'd take me to them ranches, drop me off. And so I learned how to read cattle, you know, roping, and it has a lot to do with reading cattle. And so I learned most of that from him, you know. And then after I got into what this horse showing thing, I met some people and got to ride some different horses along the way, you know, and I got to work for what I would consider some of the greatest trainers in the industry. You know, as everybody knows, a few of them are, first one I went to work for, you know, there was a little personality conflict with his arrogance and mine. And, but me and Bob Avila went a long ways. And, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to speak you there, Bob. But then, you know, I actually got to work for some of the greatest in the field. I worked for Benny Catrone. I worked for Don Murphy. I worked for Robbie Schroeder. These are people that I look up to. But it all started with my dad.
So I'd like to introduce to you Brady Merritt. He's got a few things to say and maybe a question or two.
Yeah, so, you know, well, Blue Valentine is probably 10 times more famous than he was when he was alive, and kind of a little story that kind of goes to show, and this happens so often. I sell animal health products on the side of breeding horses, and was in a store, and I was talking to the store manager, and we got to talking about what he does as a hobby, and he has some horses in his backyard, and he does some day work on the side with these horses. And anyways, he says, oh, you know, they're Hancock bred, they're Blue Valentine. Do you know about Blue Valentine? And I said, well, I'm Brady Merritt, and that was my family's horse, and then he said he was impressed, and he says, well, you know, we call the Blue Valentines, we call them the Rolls Royce of ranch horses, and anyways, it's you know, the Hancocks were known for their grit, and Blue Valentine brought in the disposition and the color on top of that. And Dad, I want you to talk about what the history, the mares that he was bred to, and where they came from. And because Blue Valentine was made by a string of true men that were truer than any men, and Buster and Lori and King and Hyde and you. So, and then talk a little bit about why he became more famous now than when he. So.
Thank you. I was hoping that nobody would ask me any questions. You know, back King Merritt, this is something I was going to say tonight, but King Merritt, my granddad, he was, you know, the first AQHA director from Wyoming a long time ago. I mean, we got our 80-year certificate here this last winter. My family's been in the business for a long time. But King, he did a lot of things. I mean, he's a world champion. He judged the first quarter horse show in California. He brought the first quarter horse stud to Wyoming. But he produced a steer roping at Encampment, Wyoming. He invited the top 15 steer ropers. There were 4 ropers from Oklahoma came up there. Shote Webster, Jim McIntyre, Clark McIntyre, Shote, and Everett Shaw. And when they left all the money. And, I mean, people in Wyoming had never seen Colorado. I mean, I've got videos of that steer open, and there are people hanging off the fences, in the stands, just everywhere. It was a 30-foot score. Pasture was probably, God, I don't know. It had to be a quarter of a mile by a quarter of a mile. 30-foot score, and then you go look at the steers, and they weighed 800-900 pounds. Well, these 4 guys from Oklahoma, one was riding a son of Joe Hancock, 3 of them were riding sons of Roan Hancock. My dad told me that 2 of those horses could win a halter class anywhere, and 2 of them weren't going to win anything in a halter class. But they left with all the money. And I talked to Clark McIntyre later about, he was the only one left that was at those rodeos. Clark, he says, you know, we'd come up there, you know, with a couple thousand in our pocket and win some money, go home, and then I'd buy land with that money in Oklahoma. You could buy land $7 an acre. But you can imagine 1948 plunking down $1,000. That was a lot of dang money. But anyway, I'm taking too much time here, but my granddad, Buster Hayes, who was my mom's dad, he had a big ranch in northern Wyoming. And along with my dad and everybody saw those Hancock horses because those guys would rope calves on them, steer rope on them, do whatever, punch cows on them, and they were, I mean, some of those videos I got will just scare you to death because about every 20th horse was going down, getting a bad jerk and going down. And, you know, if you've ever tripped steers, and JD will identify, you got to hold this saddle horn. And sometimes that saddle horn gets yanked 2 feet out from under your hand because that jerk hits you so hard. So those horses could take it, and everybody fell in love with those horses. So my granddad, Buster Hayes, he had a big ranch, a lot of mares. He he bought a son of Joe Hancock called Texas Blue Bonnet, and that started his breeding program off. And I don't know, what else did you want me to talk about, Brady? That's about all I can. But that kind of started, King, you know, he was world champion steer roper and roped, and I mean, in 1922 he won second in the bronc riding, second in the calf roping, second in the steer roping, and second in the bulldog at Cheyenne. I mean, he did every event. But he loved steer roping, and he loved to match race. I mean, he loved to match race. I think he'd go to rodeos just to match race. And so he raised those kind of horses, the ones he wanted to match race and the ones he wanted to rope steers on. And so that's the mares that came down through the ages to our horses were mares that Blue Valentine was bred to. And I think that the reason, I've thought about this a lot, but the reason Blue Valentine has got such a staying power are the mares he was bred to originally. Because they were really good performance mares, a lot of color in them, but they were big-footed, good bone, and lasting. Not enough, Brady.
Thank you. So, I think we'd like to hear from Deb Myers on just exactly what it was like to ride Frenchman's Guy and compete on him. So, Deb, here's the microphone. You want to stand up, or would you rather sit down? It's okay.
Well, Bill started Guy on the barrels, and he took him to a couple fraternities, I think it's 5-year-old year, just local ones, and then we just kind of left him alone. Turn it up higher. And so then we turned him out for the year, and I got to thinking, geez, I wonder if I could run barrels on him. Maybe I ought to try him. So I legged him up that winter in the snow and took him to a few jackpots, and he was doing pretty good. So I thought, I'll test him out. I'll take him to a thing we called the Spring Fling. Christy Peterson over here, she was running Bozo then. And my friend Lori here, she had a horse, and we thought, we'll go to the Spring Fling. If he can compete with those girls, then I might take him rodeoing. So we went to the Spring Fling. I get there, and I think out of the 12 girls that were leading the WPRA at the time, 8 of them were there. And I kind of got a little bit scared, and I said, God, please just don't let me fall off. I don't even care if I don't win any money. But I think he ended up, I think Susie Seplow was there. She was leading it at the time, and Christy was there with Bozo, and Becky Carson was there, and Marlene Edelman, there was a bunch of them there. But anyway, he ended up 3rd there, I think. So I went on and started riding them at the rodeos, and Lori and I went a little bit, and I went quite a bit with them the first year. I had run a 3/4 sister to him, and she had gotten hurt, so he kind of took over. And went to quite a bit of local 5-state area. I probably stayed in the 5-state area because I had 3 little boys at the time. But and Lori, my traveling partner, helped me out quite a bit with the youngest one. But anyway, so he qualified for the NRCA finals, which was a 5-state area, and the SDRA finals, and got to the point where he was getting pretty busy thanks to Bozo and Christy kind of getting a lot of recognition because he was related to Bozo. And so he got pretty busy in the breeding shed, and that's a whole nother story. We were live covering them, and Bill and I were collecting them on our own, and the vet would just cringe every time I left the yard with him. God, you just can't do that. You're going to hurt him. You got too many mares to him. So it got to the point where I was traveling by myself because I'd breed a mare in the morning, get in the trailer, take him to a rodeo, come back home, breed a mare at night, get up in the morning, breed a mare, and go to another rodeo. And I was doing a lot of backtracking, so nobody wanted to go with me. So I might go to 3-4 rodeos and breed 4 or 5 mares that weekend, but the vet didn't think that was a good idea. So we kind of backed off after a while, and we just mostly got so busy in the breeding shed that but I think the first 6 rodeos I took him to, I think he won 5 out of those first 6. And it was so easy for him because he just was so athletic. And because he was so athletic, it was so easy for his mind too. So he was a lot of fun to travel with, and he was such a well-mannered horse. I hauled him with mares, it didn't really matter. You know, the only thing I watched out for him was he didn't have an eye on the right side, so I will always tell people, if you want to ride beside me, that's fine, but ride where he can see you, because otherwise it makes him nervous. So I looked out for his eye, but he was a lot of fun to haul.
I have a question given to me by the audience for you, Paul. So a common denominator here has been how important family is to a horseman or to a horse. And something I would add to that is the next generation of horsemen. So the person in the audience wants to know how your wife and daughters have been involved in your career.
Well, when you're a horse trainer, it's a tough life. It's a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour job. And my wife and daughters have been there to support me all the way through my career, which it's hard to explain how important to have a good family support system when you come home after it's not all winning. So trainers can come home grumpy and tired, and to have that family there that's always supporting you when you come home after good nights and bad nights, it's very important. So I want to thank my family, Marin and Mia and Allie, that are here today, supporting me still, right here. Thank you.
Tell us about the girls' interest in horses. The girls' interest in horses.
Well, my daughter Mia loves horses. My daughter Allie, she doesn't love horses. My daughter Mia right now rides hunter jumper horses. And I'm glad I only have one daughter that's in horses, actually. Hunter jumpers are interesting, to say the least. My other daughter Allie was a swimmer, so the swim caps and goggles were much cheaper than the horses and saddles. So, but Mia, she really loves the horses, and that makes me real happy.
Dr. Hurd, I came in last night for the unveiling, and it'd been a while since I'd been in here. And I was looking at the walls, and so many good friends that I have are on the walls, and many of those are past presidents. Talk about the weight on your shoulders when you assume the presidency of the AQHA, the footsteps that you followed, and the footprints that you plan to leave to those that are following you.
Am I getting all the hard questions? You know, and I'm going to mention this tonight, but when you go on the executive committee, you make a commitment to our breed, to our association, and to our members. And every decision you make, I was only on for 4 years, but every decision you make for those 4 or 5 years, that's the question you ask. Is this going to be good for our breed, for our association, and for our membership? And most of the people that are on this wall that we consider great presidents, that was their priority. It was always about what was good for the association. And so you sit down in that room, and all of the past presidents, I've heard Frank say this, it looks like their eyes are all turned to that table when you sit up there in that room. And they're always feel like they're watching you. And that was always my priority, was what's going to be best for our association, our horse, and our members.
Probably is. We've got Jim's daughter, Beverly Flores, that wants to say something, maybe ask her father a question. Beverly?
Thank you.
Now, don't stand next to the speaker.
Well, you put him over here. I was just following the earlier. Yeah, perfect. Well, first of all, very fortunate to get to be here and obviously celebrate my dad. And grew up with a lot of what he just said of, what was going to be the best, not only today, but for the longer term future. And so I got to grow up not only seeing his leadership for the industry, for the horses, but probably the most meaningful part for my brother and I is for the people. And I didn't think I would get emotional. talk a little bit about the impact and what motivated you, especially for college students, but young people. You set that tone for expectations for what was possible.
You know, when you decide that you want to teach, then you make a commitment to the people you're teaching. And I probably neglected my family and myself at times. There's 4 people here off the last judging team that I had. The only undefeated judging team in the history of horse judging showed up here. And to think that you had an impact in those kids' lives. And here's a young lady, not young anymore, but that told Eleanor, Eleanor said, "What's it like to be on one of Dr. Hurd's judging team?" She said, "Well, I was on 25 years ago, and the counseling's almost working." Dixon Varner asked me one time, he said, did you have every good kid on your judging teams? And I said, no, but everyone that was on there was good. And that's you love to take the raw talent that's there, whether it's a student, a judging team member, a member of the association, or a rider, and see how far you can develop them. At least that was what it was for me. So thanks, Bev.
We've got a question from Paul Jones' daughter, Mia.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was already teasing him about questions earlier, but I'm not going to ask you any of those, don't worry. So this is more of a overall question, maybe for everyone. Dad, I won't single you out, I promise. But one of the first things that I was taught when I was younger is I had to tack up my own horse and learn all of the parts of the horse, all of those really important horsemanship questions. And I kind of wanted to ask, for all of you guys, horsemanship is the #1 thing, and how do you guys go about that every day in your barn, and what has really been the standout part of horsemanship that separates you from everyone else?
Well, I believe, horsemanship is first, and the love and the care and the general care of the animal comes first. The health, the feed, the welfare, just general care comes first. #1 thing in any discipline of horses, right? I believe we all believe that. And I think the dotting the T's and crossing the I's with the horsemanship as far as the care of taking care of the horse from anywhere from his feet to his legs to his general health, his coat, his feeding times, watching a horse, reading a horse. Horses, obviously, they can't tell you when they're sore. They can't tell you when they're not feeling good. So being able to read a horse and know when he's sore, know when he's off, know when he's not feeling good, know when his coat looks dull, know when he's underweight or overweight. But just basically the horsemanship of knowing how to look at a horse and let the horse tell you by reading the horse, I believe is real important.
Let me just say something real quick about my dad's horsemanship. Sorry. So at one point, my dad had 150, 175 horses at the barn at Los Al, and that also included maybe 100 head at the ranch down in Temecula. And when I was little growing up, I would walk the barn aisles with my dad every single day. And he would talk to every single horse. He'd touch every single horse. He would check on every single one of those horses, making sure that every single one of them was okay. And that's where I learned my horsemanship from. So.
Thank you, yeah.
So we have a question that Lena Banks would like to ask.
JD, I've known you since I was 12, so this probably terrifies you that I'm up here. So when I saw you the other night for the first time, you showed me the belt buckle that you're wearing, and you shared with me it's the first and only time that you've worn that belt buckle. And that belt buckle is from winning the most coveted award at the World Championship show, the Super Horse Award. And you won it with a great horse called Smoke-a-Mokie. So you and Bob Avil, I believe, share that buckle. And I want you to talk a little bit about the importance of that award and that special day and what winning the Super Horse means, because it was your first, but it wasn't your only one.
Well, yeah, like I said earlier, dealing with me and Bob Avila together was probably not easy for an owner. And Kimberly French from Alaska owned the horse. And we tried 2 years. The first year we tried to do this, man, there was this lady named Carol Harris Parker. We just couldn't beat her. And she had this horse called Rugged Lark, and Rugged Lark took it to us. And we had to figure out a way to win and a way to get by. So at the last day of the World Show that year, of course, Bob was always at the bar at Chisholm's at the bar, So we met at Chisholm's at the bar with the owner of this horse, and we drew it up right there at Chisholm's of how we was going to go about it. And at that time, it was judged a lot there. It was a lot different, the scoring part, and so we had 5 classes. And we had 2 easy ones, the rein and the cow horse, and we had 3 tough roping classes. No, so we decided that we was going to go out at the first of the year and get the horse qualified in the roping. Then he would go back to Yamhill, Oregon to Bob. I would go up there to some shows. He would qualify him in the reining and the cow horse up there. And then we would go forward throughout the year. So the whole thing, we were on process. We was on target. We was headed in the right direction. And then, of course, Bob had the horse really fit. We show up at the World Show, and I always get a place to practice outside of town where we can go school the horses and do that. And the way the schedule worked, we showed that horse in all 5 classes first. And we made the finals in all 5 classes. And we had made a deal with each other that he does his thing, I don't question him. I do my thing, and he don't question me because of our personalities. And so everything's going really good, and Bob showed and his 2 finals first. And I showed in the head and in the heeling finals next. And we're doing good. We're doing good. We've won a lot, but we don't have the win. And so that last day, the finals of the calf roping used to be on Saturday night after the jumping. And I had went back out to the Lazy E, and I was going to school this horse in the calf roping. And he was tired. I used him to help on a lot. That was Bob's idea. I needed to keep him sharp the whole time. And Bob said, we got to use him. We put our heart and soul in this. We got 720 days in today. So we did it, and I used him to help on. I roped for other guys on him during the show, and it's all coming to play. But I got a tired horse for the calf roping, and he ain't really wanting to work the rope. And I left that barn about 8 o'clock that morning, and the final started at 7 that night. I roll back in there about 5:30, and Kim Fritz takes the horse, puts him up, watches him. Bob says, how'd it go? And I said, well, it finished up all right. It finished up all right. We're going to do it. So I'm going to go to the hotel and take a shower, go get cleaned up, come back in, and Bob says, can I talk to you? I wasn't real sure what that meant. And he said, you know when you drew up? No, I just got back here. This is halfway through the jumping. I said, no, I don't have any idea. He said, you draw it up first. Okay, I'm good with that. He said, been looking at this super horse standings, and we got to win better than 10th to win it. I'm like, oh, okay, I can do that. And then the real question come. He says, what's your thoughts on carrying 2 loops? Yeah, my good friend Bob Abel asked me that. Now my arrogance is coming out. No, hell no, I ain't gonna carry no 2 loops. I come in here to win this thing. And then a few guys talked to me, and he said, okay, and turned around and walked off. I never seen him again. He went to the stands. He's like, man, that arrogance is a little loud for me right now. I ain't gonna deal with that guy. And so a few friends come around, and a few friends talk to me, and I rode around because they're having to jump off, and they're starting to take the jumps out, and I started thinking about it. I carried 2 loops. But I did win the world, not even the calf row, but it was get to wear that buckle.
Oh, that's classic, JD. Nikki Miller. They warned me about that, but I thought I was far enough away. Nikki, come up and talk a little bit about Shining Spark.
Right here? Okay. Is this okay? Can you hear me? My name's, is it okay? This one? Okay. I have no problem talking loud or fast, so yeah. My name is Nikki Miller. I worked for the Shining Spark team in Carroll for 11 years. And there's a couple people that are really important that weren't here tonight, Gabriel Gonzalez and Luis Camacho. Gabriel, well, let me say, Shiner is so good-minded and was so sweet that even I could catch him, anybody could handle him. I never felt like he was person-specific. He was just good for everybody. But we all knew Gabriel was his person first. And I worked in the office and down in the barn, and I have a lot of miles between the barn, and I observed a lot of things. And my favorite thing ever was to watch Shiner in the barn waiting for Gabriel. And if you looked if anybody had seen the main barn, you could see horses' noses all the time put through the bars, but not Shiner, not very much, at least not when Gabriel was in the barn, because he would be pressed as tight as he could be against the wall. And you would see his eyeball just peeking through. You could see, and if the wind was blowing, you'd see his white mane flow through there. But he'd watch, and he'd wait until we would call up on the intercom to let him know, or somebody would let him know it's time to bring Shiner to the breeding barn. And it was such a science, because his collection halter was in there, and you'd watch Shiner, watch Gabriel. And then you hear the beep, it's time. But he couldn't hear that. But he saw Gabriel move, and that horse would pull off the wall, and he'd, as excited as he can be, he would just toss his hair and go, and he'd be wait to be caught. So that was his thing. We'd walk down to the barn. He'd walk down and he'd tease mares along the way. Dr. Hartman would start to build his AV, and somebody would peep out the door. And I'm usually in this transit of watching this happen. And Shiner was so good that Gabriel would be barely holding the end of the rope, and usually a coffee cup in his other hand. I mean, any other horse would have been gone, but Shiner just did his thing. And when Dr. Harmon would say it's time, Yolanda, Gabriel's wife, would open the door, and she had this trademark whistle, and Shiner, like Gabriel's talking and not, paying attention, Shiner was, because you'd make that whistle, and Shiner would just zip around and leave Gabriel to the barn. And Gabriel's like, see, he don't need me. I said, yeah. Well, so in that care, Shiner got out of his stall every day per Gabriel, whether it would be on the equicizer or turned out, and sometimes he would ride him. And he was such a smart ass when he rode him, pardon my language, but he was. And one time, Gabriel's walking along in the outdoor arena, and he's walking like kind of where he's going to disappear behind the round pen, also holding a cup of coffee. And on the other hand, he's got the reins so long, it's almost dangerous, honestly. He's holding the tips of his reins, and he's like, look at my horse. He's very trained. And I did it. I said, And I'm watching Shiner's ears flicker, and he's walking closer and closer, about to disappear behind the round pen. And all of a sudden, you see Shiner's ears go forward. You saw Shiner saw something, and he disappears behind. I'm turning to leave, only I hear a commotion. And I go over there, and Gabriel's coffee cup is on the ground, his butt is up in the air, and he's just screaming his reins up, because Shiner had caught hold of a steer that was waiting in the corner, and he was leaving Gabriel. Thanks. Sorry.
Thank you. We've got Baru that has a question here.
Whatever you want me to do. So I raised a bunch of Blue Valentines, and well, a few anyway. And well, this is kind of more of a story, maybe, for you and everybody. But I raised quite a few. I had a stud and some good mares, and with Blue Valentine strength. And I was pretty busy breeding. I was a bookkeeper on a bookkeeper's salary, which wasn't much, and so I pretty much lived hand to mouth, trying to get all those horses bred and sold. And I did sell quite a few babies, and they were all excellent. And one of the last ones that I had, I bred him, I raised him, and he was, to me, perfect Blue Valentine. He was big, stout, but he was so kind to me. He just trusted everything I did. I never had to fight with any of them. And I'm talking to these guys up here because I want him to know how proud I am of those horses. And this horse that I had, I got to a point in my life where I needed to make a change, and I was going out single, and which was a good move. But I had this colt, and he was very trusting of me, and all of those Blue Valentines that I raised were like that. They were all great dispositions, I think, and were just really wonderful horses. But this last one that I had started early in the 2000s to try and do rein cow horse. And so I had a mare, a buckskin mare that I bought from the Sixes sale early on, and I was training her for the rein cow horse. And so I was trying to cut back a little bit on my breeding so that I could show. And she became a really good mare for me. But at the same time, I had this Blue Valentine gelding, and he was wonderful. And I thought, wow, I really want to do him in the rein cow horse. And I wasn't deterred by this, but he was 16 hands, 1,400 pounds. And everything about him was in the perfect place as far as I was concerned. And so I started training him for the rein cow horse, and I started showing in some of the shows, and West Texas, around this area. And my best friends, neither one of them are here today, I don't think, so I'm going to go ahead and say it, but Kim Lindsay was my very best friend, and we showed together a lot. And so when I started bringing this great big blue gelding, she told me, and some judges also told me the same thing. He's too big, he's not athletic enough, don't waste your time. So I showed him a whole year that way, and ended up in the standings, pretty decent. And so I was proud of him. I'd gotten that far with this great big horse. And I loved riding him. And the next year, the first show of the year was at Lubbock. And my good friend Kim, who I traveled with a lot, said, Baru, I don't think you should bring him anymore. He's not going to be any good. He's too big. He's not athletic. And the same way with a good judge, a friend of mine, Bozo Rogers, said the same thing. So I just kept smiling, and I just went on with my horse. I was showing both of the horses at the same time. And so, make a long story short, at the end of the year, and I weighed him every time I went to Texas Tech, because they had a scale there. I weighed him every time, and he was 1,600 pounds. 16 hands, 1,400 pounds. And so, at the end of the year, in the Rain Cow Horse, they have accumulation points, if you will, to make it. We won some stuff. I won some stuff on him. I placed in shows. And at the end of the year, they had my horse won the entire region: Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and what's under Louisiana? Above Louisiana, Arkansas. Anyway, all 4 states in that region, I won. This horse won the whole region for me. And they never said any more about that big blue Vallon horse not being athletic.
Thank you. Robin's got a question for Carol. Then we're going to take Catherine.
Well, it pertains to most of you. Okay. Because most of you have touched young people and got their...
So Robin gets a little emotional when she talks about young people, okay? And all of you have had some young people that you've mentored in your lives. Carol, let's start with you. And why don't you tell us how meaningful those young people have been under your tutelage and then gone on to do bigger and greater things.
You know, that's the love of my life, when I was able to help kids. And you know, it was wonderful, because I was a kid once and I started showing horses when I was 5 years old. I grew up in California, and fortunately for me, I grew up around some of the greatest horsemen that have ever been. And they loved my mother. Mother took me to the horse shows. These people all mentored me and took me under their wing and taught me so much. And then now, you know, for the last 50 years, I've been raising horses and being a professional in this industry, and I know how much it meant for me to learn from people older than me, so I love to help kids and teach them everything I know. And it's meant everything. We used to, for many years, when the AQHA World Show, Youth World Show was in Fort Worth, I would take my whole crew down there to work the cattle, take care of the back gate, take care of all the cattle, get them in and out of the arena, settle the cattle for the cutting. I mean, it took it, and we charge AQHA nothing. This was all free, gratis, because we love to help kids. And it's just paid back so many times to me. But one of the best young people I ever mentored, was Tyler Merrill, son of Robin and Frank. And he worked for me for several years, and he just did a wonderful job. And Tyler was already a good horseman, but he needed to hone up on some horsemanship skills. And like Paul, I feel exactly the same. I mean, it all starts on the ground, and you have to learn. I mean, I teach him everything, we try to teach him everything about a horse that comes before riding him. And my people work for me. They go walk the barns twice a day and look at the horses, because the best time to tell when one's not feeling well is when they're sick, when they're eating. You can tell if they're not eating, they're not feeling well. And same thing, go to the pasture and look at all the mares. And so they all learned that, and Tyler was one of them. And he was a phenomenal student. And I mean, he's just an example of so many we've had. And Tyler went on, he showed for me at the Snaffle Bit Fraternity one year. He made the finals in the limited, I'm talking about the National Ring Cow Horse Snaffle Bit Fraternity. And then he went on, and Tyler went from me to go on his own, and he's done a remarkable job. And he's an example of kids that I've mentored. Thank you.
Paul, why don't you speak a little bit about kids that you've mentored at the racetrack, because it's very difficult for youth to get involved in that industry, and AQHA's done as much as they possibly can to try to promote that, but it really starts with you trainers.
Well, the AQHA youth program during the challenge races has always been a great program to mentor kids, to teach them about the ins and outs about horse racing. The unfortunate part about our youth today is a lot of them are not exposed to horses. You know, I was lucky enough that my parents were involved in horses, and probably most of us were probably in the same situation. But I think that we definitely need to work on the ability of youths to get exposure to horses, the youths that their family are not into horses, that they may love horses. So I think if we could all work on that, and I always am more than welcome to help any youth at any time. I've had a few that have come to me and got jobs as grooms and later on became trainers. And so it's always nice, and I've always been very welcome to any youths and very helpful. And I think that that's one of the things that as an association that we really need to work on to get more exposure to youths that don't have the exposure.
Thanks, Paul. Jim?
I want to follow up on Carol's comments. Before every major judging contest, I had people that I would call and ask if we could come work out at their place. Carol never one time said, "No, I'm busy." She would stop whatever she was doing and have 5, 6, 8 classes lined up for us. Every person on the place was there. I only let 2 people talk to my judging teams.
Thanks, Jim.
Well, not finished.
Okay.
One was Carol Rose,
I'm
the other
sorry.
was Jack Kyle, because I knew they weren't going to tell them something that I had to fix. And if I had a student that wasn't listening, when I got there, I'd say, "Carol, I need you to talk to that one right over there, if you don't mind." And every time we left Carol's place, we were better as a team.
Thank you, Dr. Hurd. And my experience with judging teams, when I was in college, I was on a livestock judging team at Cal Poly, California. But I specialized in horses, and then at all the big stock shows we'd go, I'd judge all the livestock, but also judge horses. And so I had a wonderful coach, and he was very, very strict, and I learned how to give reasons and how you're supposed to give reasons, and that's how I became eligible, Dr. Hurd says, but to help his judging teams. And I love helping them, because I had such a coach when I was young, and to pay that forward that's my dream, that's my life. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. All good comments. Catherine Simmons has got a question for Paul.
Actually, I got a question for the audience first. How many of you guys are show people by a raise of hands? Okay, how many of you guys are race people by raise of hands? Okay, well, that's actually more race people than I thought. But so I just wanted to educate the audience a little bit, Paul, about the magnitude of what you have been able to accomplish monetarily versus, I mean, the show industry is amazing, obviously, but you have won how much as a trainer?
I think my horses have are around 91 million, I believe, as of today.
I think that deserves a round of applause. And you've had how many AQHA champions?
14 AQHA champion trainer titles.
14, yes, trainer titles. And the horses, how many horses have you had that are champions? Do you remember?
Actually, I don't know that number, but it's
25.
I'm sorry?
25.
25? Okay. I kind of lose track.
You've had 25 horses, but 38 championships because some of those horses got multiple titles. So I think that deserves a round of applause as well.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
So I know we've talked a whole lot about horses, but I have gotten to know this man up here for the past seven or so years. And unlike J.D. Yates, this man does not have an arrogant bone in his body.
Exactly.
One of the things that I want him to tell you about, if you don't mind, Paul, is how you have paid it forward with the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Yes, I had the fortunate opportunity to have a young man named Emmanuel that was had terminal cancer, and his make-a-wish was to come and meet me and some of the jockeys at Los Alamitos. So he came in from Florida with his family, and the Make-A-Wish Foundation paid for everything, and it was a true honor to bring this young man in and take him to the barn and show him the horses, introduce him to the jockeys. And also I sent him home with a pair of silks and some hats and a pair of blinkers, a lot of memorabilia from the horses. And it was a great honor. He was a very nice young man. Didn't look that ill at the time. Unfortunately, he passed away a week later. So, but it was a great honor to be able to help the Make-A-Wish Foundation and help Emmanuel and his family. So, thank you.
Frank, in JD's defense, it's not bragging if you can do it. And just a quick story, it was like early 2000s, AQHA was looking at some ways to liven up what happened on championship night at the World Show, and so Don Treadway called and said, hey, we put together this deal where we're doing an in-house radio broadcast. So when you walk in, you get these earbuds, and you can listen to the commentary. And he said, I got guys that will help you do stuff. Unfortunately, one of the guys was Al Dunning. So Al's part horse trainer, part comedian. So people would think that the crowd was laughing at them, that they had made a mistake, because Al was always making a joke here and there. And we weren't paying that much attention to what was happening. But JD was, one of the classes we did was team roping, and JD was on a horse that was kind of favored to win the world. And I'm sure it wasn't his fault, but he missed on the first loop. And they kind of chased the steer around, and out of frustration, he roped him left-handed and dallied. And the only comment I made was, well, if that question had been lingering in the back of your mind, it's yes, JD is better left-handed than you are right-handed. So go ahead.
That's a good one. I remember that too. Billy Myers has got something to say.
Yeah, I'm Billy. I'm Bill's son. I don't really know. Dave just asked me if I'd say something. So basically, I've just kind of been sitting here thinking about what I was going to ask. And it's kind of interesting to look out because you go back to Frenchman's Guy's career, and Kelly Yates was one of the first people to ever have success on a Frenchman's Guy offspring. So you have JD and Christy being here, Lori being the breeder of that horse. When did you guys first start to realize that Frenchman's Guy was making that impact on the industry?
You know, it was one of them deals where we just kind of went along and made a living. But yeah, right in there was probably when some of the ones got out in the bigger picture and showed they could compete, you know, nationally really good. So probably right in that same time frame that they was running there, which would have been what, 80 no, I've been in the 90s, I guess. But yeah, right there, them was some of the first ones for sure, and that was when we realized that he was probably gonna have a chance of being a pretty good sire.
Marcia's got a question for JD.
Thank you. I want to take a moment to thank everybody at AQHA. It's really an honor to be here, and thank you to all of you that are on the panel today, and just the stewardship that you have of the breed, and also your business is really apparent, so thank you to all of you. My question is to JD. I rope with him, and I'm an amateur. It's a little bit of a take on Jeff's question. You know, what do you do different between the rodeo and the horse showing? JD, what do you do to have a horse that I can rope on? I'm sure throughout the years I've gotten the look that you gave Bob earlier because I know that it's not easy, but if you could take a moment to just kind of tell how you find a horse for somebody like me to be successful on, and then what do you do to bring us along where we can achieve something that's notable?
Well, I mean, it goes back to the first original thing I said. You know, the training on the horses, spending the time on them, seeing what you have, and spending the time with the amateurs. They can learn to ride a lot of horses, but you know, I think that where we're at in this industry today is we take a lot of horses in training, and sometimes I don't get them all finished because we take too many horses in training. And I think that to do the best job for anybody to ride the horse, they've got to have a lot of wet saddle blankets, and you got to have a lot of time on them, and do your job training them. And if you do your job training them, they should be where a lot of people could ride them. And so I don't think that I train any different for an amateur than I do myself, other than, you know, there's a few horses that might have a little higher strung or something that might not fit an amateur. But that don't mean we didn't do our job training them. They're just a little higher strung. But I think that as a trainer, as long as you're sitting on them and you're riding them and you're trying to train them and you spend enough time on them, they're going to be where a lot of people can ride them. That's my beliefs.
Mr. Richie Bell's got a question for Carol.
Well, actually, as I've said here, the question, it really is to everyone on the panel. But just to give you a little background, we had never been, my family had never been involved in performance horses. And when, about 22 years ago, my wife and I had a 3-year-old daughter, and we've always loved the Western lifestyle. And I had a team penning horse that I wasn't about to put my 3-year-old daughter on or get anywhere near. So I thought, well, I'll go buy a good horse. And we went over and talked to Carol, and she took us down to the barn. And there was this little gorgeous 2-year-old filly that had sorrel filly that had a flax mane and tail. It's the prettiest horse I'd ever seen in my life. We bought her right on the spot. And then subsequently, we bought 2 other Shiner mares. And of course, the Shiner mares are you know, I guess, known for their quality. And that first mare we bought was Shiny Tari. Today, she's the #2 all-time leading dam in the NRCHA. And we had another horse, Shining Smartly, and another horse, Shining Survivor. All 3 of those horses were completely different. None of them looked alike, but they were all winners. We had a high fence score, a high reining score, the Hackamore champion, and the snaffle bit. And my point through that horse, those 3 horses changed the trajectory of our family, in that we had so much success with them that we've been showing horses continually now, and they've really changed the trajectory of our life. And when I was up earlier today looking at the Shining Spark display up on the 2nd floor, I noticed that, you know, there's 1,400 Shiner foals. And I just wonder how many life trajectories have been changed because of those horses. I was talking to Cheryl Cody earlier today. She's had a Shiner mare, and she made the comment, it just changed, that mare changed the trajectory of my life. Well, I just wonder, for you up here, the main breeders up here on the floor, have y'all ever, are there ever any thoughts as you're going through this business in this world of how you've changed lives, and how, in Shining Spark's case, you've got one horse that have changed the trajectory of so many lives of individuals and families? And I just wonder if any of that ever crosses your mind as you've gone through the process. But at any rate, we certainly appreciate it.
Anybody want to comment on that up there?
You know, as far as Blue Valentine, when it was announced that he was in the Hall of Fame, we got over 1,000 emails, texts, calls, and I am not sure how that compares to anybody else, but it was amazing to me that there was that many people out there that felt, this is my comment, that felt that way about Blue Valentine. Over 1,000 people, and there, a lot of them are horse show people and barrel racing people and stuff. But most of the people we deal with are trail riders, cowboys, I mean, I talk to cowboys all the time, said my best horse that I ride in rough country is that horse I got from you guys. That's a Blue Valentine. And so, you know, there's a big chunk of the AQHA that are just people out there that raise have a couple mares, trail ride, team rope, you know. I mean, a lot of people in this room and up here are big-time horse show people. But Blue Valentine, I mean, there's been some horses. We had a horse at Sam Schultz that was out of one of my mares and by Leo Hancock Hayes that had over 700 AQHA points. And, I mean, and it took him some money to get to that point, you know. And there's been other horses that have made the world show, but not a big part. But I just want to say thank you to those people that love Blue Valentine. That we got, on the way down, we just got call after call after call, people telling us congratulations.
If we ask Chip very many more questions, we're going to have to get him more iced tea.
Well, it's a little more than iced tea.
Or I was going to say, we'll switch it out with some bourbon. You might get a little livelier. How do you want Blue Valentine to be remembered while we're just kind of on that subject? And you have a little tea left.
Well, you know, we want Blue Valentine just to be remembered that he was a great horse. He was a friend of our family. He put us on the map. I mean, my dad and my granddad, they were already on the map, but it really put my family on the map, and we've been riding them ever since. I tripped steers on 2 sons of Blue Valentine. My little brother, Lori, I think is in here somewhere, and he had 3 calf horses that he trained and roped calves on, and there was some, Dean Oliver tried to buy one that you cannot believe how much money he was offering Lori for that calf horse. So, I mean, I love it when I get a call from a lady in Alabama that we sold some mares to. She says, there's a guy next to me, it's got a son of Pepto-Bismol. The horse is about 14'2", little bitty cannon bones, little bitty feet, but an athletic sucker. And he said, that guy, he comes peering over the fence at my mares every morning, just looking at my mares. Finally, he comes over, he says, let's cross my stud on your mares and see what happens. Well, now those suckers are in the cutting pen now and beating them, and they're staying sound. They're not having to inject joints and doing that stuff. So, I mean, I love this. I got a call from a girl that bought a horse. She's a little high school girl in Minnesota. She's winning the state high school rodeos in a breakaway on the horse we raised. So I love getting those calls. We have our horse sale every fall. We just completed our 26th. And the last thing I say is I want you guys to tell us what you are loving about your horses when you get home. So that's what I want people just to think, that, you know, he was just a nice horse, and his disposition and his athletic ability is still coming out in colts now.
There it is. Sorry for the delay, folks. We have a question from the audience for Dr. Hurd, and the question is that your father fostered a love of horses in you in a very young age. Can you tell us some of your favorite memories of working together with horses, with him?
My father would make Glenn Blodgett look like a talker, just so you know how quiet he was. And you could ask him a question, and if you couldn't see his head, you didn't know what the answer was. But he grew up on a farm in East Tennessee, down in Meigs County, and he grew up with workhorses and mules. And so his knowledge was imparted to him. And when I was about 5 years old, we had a neighbor that started sending me ponies to ride. And Dad would come out and work with me. And of course, I think it's in the video tonight. He's the reason I got interested in quarter horses. He came home one day and said, we need to go to one of our neighbors and look at this new breed of horse. And He said they come from out west, they use them on ranches, and he said they're gentle. And for you horse show people, I probably shouldn't say this, he said they don't need a trainer to be able to show them. We've changed that a little bit. And so we went over there, and that was my first experience. I was 13 years old, my first experience with the American quarter horse, and I've been at it ever since. So he was a man that, few words, but great integrity, and I'll tell a story tonight about that. So.
Okay, I've got one. Becky Newell's got a question or a comment for JD.
As y'all know, we're fixing to have the 50th anniversary of the World Show this year, so I've been going through all the past stories in the journal covering the World Show. And I came across one about the dueling cousins. JD, your favorite partners are your dad and your son, I'm sure, but then there's Jaylyn. And in 1996, they tied in the junior heeling. Do you want to finish that story, please?
Well, you know, when I started training horses and stuff, my cousin Jay worked with me, and we tied there the World Show for the junior heeling, and we looked at each other walking down the alley, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I said, "Good luck. I don't know if you can get around the old man." And he said, "Well, remember, I'm roping for you." And I said, "Well, yeah, remember, I'm roping for you." But it made us both winners. We both won that day. So that's the way we run our life and our family.
So I'm going to take the MC's prerogative here and ask a question of you, Carol. You know how much I think of Genuine Doc. Sparkles Rosanna had a big influence on Shining Spark, but I seem to think that Genuine Doc is overlooked, and his influence, the way he was bred, and his athletic ability. I'd like to have you speak a little bit about him.
Okay, first of all, you said Sparkles Rosanna. Did you mean Diamond Sparkle? Diamond Sparkle. Thank you, Frankie. That's okay. I can do this with my son. It's okay.
Sorry.
I think you all know that I'm the very first one in the horse industry to ever see Frank Merrill, so I can say this to him.
Don't tell that story, please.
I won't. I promise I won't. But anyway, Genuine Doc is, I mean, he's a marvel. He was a marvelous horse. I had a great cutting mare named Gaybar's Jen, who's by Gaybart King, and I won 4 NCHA World Championships on her in the non-pro cutting. And she was, as we know, sometimes great individuals aren't great producers, and we had a terrible time getting her in foal when we bred her to Doc Bar. And because Gaybar's Jen, Doc Bar, we got Genuine Doc. And he was a beautiful horse, beautiful conformation, great mind. We trained him. Matlock trained him, and we showed him in the cutting. We showed him in the cutting futurity. He did okay, but he didn't do great. I'd never been on his back other than just to exercise him. I'd never cut a cow on him. And I said, I think I want to show him Genuine Doc. The Augusta had a 4-year-old futurity in Augusta, Georgia. I think I want to show him in the non-pro. And I'd never cut a cow on him, so I cut one cow, and when we went to the show, and hence I won the non-pro cutting on him. I took him to Fort Worth, and I won the junior cutting on him, and so then I didn't know him very well before that, and I just grew to love this horse. And he had a great personality. He had lots of quirks, and I said earlier he wasn't a great sire because he'd sired some really nice horses, but he hadn't sired anything great until Shining Spark came along. I'll tell you something funny about Genuine Doc. You could not catch that horse in the pasture. It was impossible to catch him. And so, great friend of mine named Bill Smith, and I feel remiss I didn't have Bill come here because he was Bill Smith from Cody, Wyoming. He was a world champion saddle bronc rider, but he had studied with Ray Hunt a lot and got a lot of Ray Hunt's methods, and somebody told me that I should call Bill Smith and have him come down and help my young trainers. And so I had Bill come, and with Bill was there, and he saw us out in the pasture trying to catch genuine duck. We had to build an alley with a catch pen in it, the only way you could catch him. And Bill went out there in the pasture, and I promise you, in 10 minutes, he caught genuine duck in the middle of the pasture, and from then on, anybody could catch him. But he was a wonderful horse. He had lots of quirks, and Frank was maybe his very biggest fan. Frank loved him, and I loved him. But, you know, he lived to be 35 years old, and he had longevity, and he was sound. He just, you know, was old, and he had lots of great colts. He was a great broodmare sire, such as Shining Spark is, but he just kind of got in Shining Spark's footsteps. But Shining Spark was by far his greatest foal, but he did have some great foals.
Thanks, Carol. So, Bill, there's a story about Frenchman's Guy that I think the audience would be entertained if you'd tell about a long trailer ride he had on the way to a celebration that was honoring him. Have I got that right? I didn't hear that. So, you took your stallion to a stallion celebration, and it took you a little longer than normal to get him there. Would you tell us about that?
Our son Brandon and I, and we had started the 5-state Breeders' Bureau Fraternity, so when Guy was 30, and I think they were celebrating one of the years that they had been in business, and they asked if we'd bring Guy down for a presentation, because he had been in the 5 states since it was started. So, like I said, he was 30 years old. He hadn't been off the place probably for quite a while, except to go to the Heritage Place, to the High Plains Genetics to get collected. So we got him in the trailer, Brandon and I, and we got there, and we were supposed to Brandon was just going to lead him around. Well, he thought he was at the High Plains Genetics to get collected. So it took us quite a while before he was presentable. So we were in the trailer trying to figure out what to do, besides swatting and I mean, we tried a lot of things. We got him out, we got him back in, we walked him around. We didn't know what to do, and they were calling his name, waiting for him to go in there, and I was getting a little flustered, and finally we pulled him out. But I think he was 10 minutes late getting there, but he had thought he was getting collected, and so he didn't realize what he was being there for, but it was interesting.
That's a good story. I think we've all dealt with that once in a while. Ken Banks.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hurd, I was thinking about you and how modest you've been today up there. I have to tell a brief story about Texas A&M University. You know, they asked Dr. Hurd to come and create an equine initiative there. And he did it literally single-handed. He raised $70 million. They built a beautiful facility. It's a very heavily utilized facility. It does a lot for a lot of kids, and we have one heck of an equestrian team. I think they've got 50 all on scholarship down there. So tell us about Texas A&M and Equine Initiative.
Ken, thank you. I was at Colorado State 23 years. Obviously, the judging team is back there somewhere. Loved every minute of it. And this lady that was dean at Texas A&M asked me if I had an interest in going to A&M. I said, sure, I'll be glad to talk to you. Of course, she's my wife now, so kind of made it easier. But I had this dream of that we could build. I always told people that if you told a Texan that what you had wasn't good enough, they'd figure out a way to make it better. And particularly if they're Aggies, they're going to figure out. And so I had a dream of what a facility would look like, and I was able to get enough Aggies and people in Texas and all over Art and Catherine, all over the country that believed in what we were doing. And we had a donor one time that told us that, he said, it's not easy to give away money. I never had thought about that because I never had enough money to give away. And he said, first of all, it's community property. And he said, so our whole family has to agree that this is a good project. He said, then we got to believe in the project. And third, we got to believe in the person. He looked at Eleanor and I, and he said, I'm going to give you $25 million. At that time, that was the largest gift in the history of Texas A&M. So, and there were other people, Ken and Lena, I could go on, but people believed that we needed in Texas A&M to have the best facility and the best program, and they helped me do it. And it's all about the people, always about the people.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, okay. If I start squealing, y'all tell me, okay? So I can talk bad about Carol Rose while she's gone, right? So I'm going to start this, and I'm going to wind up with you, JD, because I'm fortunate to have some wonderful friends up there. But one of the great things about Carol Rose is she is wonderful at grilling asparagus. So you ask her about asparagus when she comes back from the bathroom. So 24 years ago, I asked Carol to help my son find a horse to rope. He was 15, barely 15, not a very good roper. She found me a horse. I asked Bobby Lewis, I said, Bobby, is this a good enough horse for my kid? We won't get hurt, yada, yada, because he's just really getting started. He said, yes, it's the right horse. So we go to haul into horse shows. And we wind up 23 years ago, still 15, in Pueblo, Colorado. And my son brought his best friend. And they are thinking they can rope. Well, JD is there with all his team. And my boys are scared to death because J.D. Yates is roping and he's watching them. And so J.D. goes over and says, KB, you mind if I help those boys a little bit? Well, what helped those boys a little bit turned out to he's heading, one of the boys is healing, then he's healing, one of the boys is heading, and he's watching them every minute and he's helping them, and he's helping them, and he's helping them. And that went on for 3 days. And one of those boys went to graduate school on the rodeo scholarship. So they were, JD, you were their idol, and you told them, and one of the things he said to them over and over is, my son's name is Russell. He says, Russell, you can do that. You can do that. So my question, because I'm going to go sit down, my question to you is, how many kids have you helped like that?
I don't know. There's a lot of kids come through there, and I help a lot of kids. You know, I had this mentor when I was a kid, and he did me right. But what I believe is helping kids is like going to school. And I was a firm believer. My parents were firm believers in me going to school and learning how to learn from other people. And I made my son go to school, and I'm very fortunate to get to teach a lot of young kids. I used to have a clinic in Kansas, and I would only take kids 13 and under every year, and it was completely full. Every year we just had a waiting list for kids. And but I don't think I taught them to rope and ride as much as I taught them that they needed to go to school. And they needed to learn. And then it was easier to learn about roping and horses. But I was a firm believer on all these kids going to school and going on to college. So that's probably my more message as kids are growing up. I'll help you with your roping. I'll help you with everything I know as long as you're in school. And I wouldn't let my kid go rodeoing professionally until he finished college. And so I think that that's a big message from me as a trainer that I want to enforce is these kids to go to school and get better because they're easier to teach. They learn how to learn when they're in school. So I think that's a big message that I try to send to most kids when I'm helping them.
So it's almost time to quit, but I thought it would be important for everybody up here to sort of have a last say, and Janet's got something she'd like to ask.
It just occurred to me as we bring this full circle that we could go down the line, and if you could briefly say what either, if you're representing a horse or if you're representing yourself, what you would like your legacy to be, or your horse's legacy to be in our industry.
How come I got to go first?
You got any tea, Bill?
I've
Or I
got a
mean
little bit of
Cliff.
tea left.
rather.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I want people to know when they come to our horse sale, it is an honest sale. It's no trickery, no nothing. We just sell them, and I want to stand behind my horses. I tell everybody, if you're not getting along with them, bring them back, and we'll get another one. I don't know. I just think honesty, and I don't know. I want my boys to love and appreciate these horses as much as I do. And we kind of started, when I was young, my dad, if a horse was 4 years old, it was time to start him. And I grew up riding those 4-year-olds, and God almighty, what a deal. And so, I kind of was doing that when before my boys were born, and then I was trying to think of a better way, and there had to be a million different ways, but we finally started riding them when they were a year and a half old. And I'd get those boys out there when they were 6 or so, and during spring or during Christmas break, and we'd ride colts. We'd ride some of those yearlings, and they learned to ride them. And my dad always, and we talked about it here a minute or a while ago, but you want to think like a horse, or he'd say, think like a cow. If you're looking at a cow, think like a cow. But he'd say, think like that horse, and watch that horse. He'll give you his eye, and when he does, you back away from him. And it didn't take any time to get horses to do what you want them to do. And you tried to make them think it was their idea. I mean, there was some people that I was around when I was young that would force horses to do whatever. But my dad was really big on making a horse think it was his idea. But I just want people to know that we had good horses, we were honest people, and had a lot of fun doing it. And I want my boys to always listen to my stories that I tell.
Thank you.
Well, I think I'd like people to remember a Frenchman's Guy as a very versatile horse that impacted a lot of people's lives. A lot of breeding programs were built from his, and he helped a lot of people in a lot of ways as far as financially, a lot of fun. People had a lot of fun riding his progeny, and I guess remember his bloodlines as time goes along, and he's got some old bloodlines that are pretty neat, and the friendships and the relationships that he created in our life. Just for example, being here amongst these people that are here, that wouldn't have been possible without him. And I don't know what to say. It'd take me quite a bit of time to really think about this question and answer it, but more than anything, just as a great versatile horse that impacted a lot of people's lives. And very proud to own him and have my family be able to benefit and see him and appreciate good horses because of, being around his colts and being able, my sons helped ride him, and Billy's helped breed the mares, and he's changed our whole life and give us a reason to get up in the morning, and he's just been a life-changing horse. Like they say, it's amazing that one horse can change your life that much, and so that's what I guess all I got to say. Thank you.
What Bill said could almost mimic what I need to say. I'm just so proud of Shining Spark. He's just been a phenomenal horse, and I'm so proud to be here today. And I have 2 other great horses that have been inducted into this great hall. Shining Spark's Diamond Sparkle in 2007, and then Zam Parbar in 2010. But Shining Spark is different from the fact that I raised him. And, it's been, when you do all this work for the past 35 years, you're not doing it so you can join the hall, get it, and have him in the Hall of Fame, but it's just it's a phenomenal honor, and I want Shining Spark's legacy to continue as it has. Since 2020, we're back to breeding him, and we're breeding lots of mares, and there's lots of foals, and starting to show back up in the show pen. And Shiner himself, because he got sick, we only did the reining, but he was in training to do the cow horse when he got sick, and people never got to see that side of him. And I was hoping Bobby Lewis would today tell you all how phenomenal he was in the cutting in the cow horse, but I haven't seen Bobby. But this horse, nobody got to see it, but I did, and Nikki did, and some others, and he was phenomenal. He was about ready to show, but nobody ever got to see that. But he's a phenomenal, versatile sire. His foals can show in any event, any Western discipline, and have proven that, have done so well. And my hope and wishes for forever is that Shining Spark's legacy continues as it is now, and as I hope it will in the future. Thank you very much.
First of all, I would like to thank the AQHA. Being inducted into the Hall of Fame is, in my opinion, the greatest honor of any horseman or horse. It's the ultimate. I would like to thank everybody for that. As my legacy goes on, I'd like to be remembered as somebody that worked hard, was honest, was good to his people, good to his clients, and good to his horses. And I'd also like to thank all those people that got me here. As a racehorse trainer, it's not just me and a horse. It's a big team. So I really owe it to a lot of people, from the jockeys to the grooms, to the horse owners, to the shoers, the veterinarians. It's a huge group to get a horse trainer, a racehorse trainer, to this position. So I would like to make it known that it's not just me personally. It takes a lot of good people and good horses to get here, and a lot of hard work and honesty. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to mimic that. There's what we do as trainers, it's the people around us that make us better. And fortunately, I've been pretty lucky and won some great awards. This is the greatest. Thank you.
I think as I look back on my career and my life, I'd like to be remembered as a person who did what they said they would do. A person that wanted to achieve excellence and that you could depend on. And if I could do those three things for the next 70 years, I'd be fine. So thank you.
Well, that about wraps it up for this session, for this fourth annual Fireside Chat. But before we leave, let's give everyone up here and their horses they represent a round of applause. Thank you all.